Phil McCoy. How are you feeling this morning, Philly?
I'm living the dream, Rob, but I do have periodic spurts of back pain due to my years of sports ball.
You see?
And I used to carry. I carried a lot of weight back then, and of course it rears its ugly head quite often. So I wish you the best of luck in your surgery, John. I hope I never have to do it.
Why, thank you very much, and I agree.
So you haven't had any back surgeries then, Phil, correct, for yours?
No surgeries, just chiropractor and maintenance. But I haven't been as stoic. I do whine sometimes about it because I'm active, and when it prevents me from doing things that I want to do or it hinders it, I whine. So I haven't been as tough as John.
Somehow, Phil, that does not surprise me.
I don't know if I appreciate that or not, Phil. But yeah,
and I don't know which way I meant it either, Phil.
And if my wife is listening to this, believe me, she's screaming at the radio. I'll tell you about whining.
That doesn't stop me from doing anything. It makes it slower sometimes. And but it is, and you're right. A lot of people deal with that, and it's especially as we age. Even though I've lost the weight that I used to carry around with me, and I no longer play any major sports anyway. It does slows you down quite a bit.
What was your offensive line playing weight there, Phil?
I normally played around about 290, but in the off season, to the dismay of Pete Urish, and I would get up well over 300 pounds, and then he would take care of that almost immediately.
we both know Pete very well and love Pete, but you don't mess with Pete.
You don't. Yeah, if you need to lose weight, you don't need Ozempic. You need Pete Urish.
You need Urish.
Shame you into losing weight. Yeah.
Yeah. What do you weigh now, Phil?
I have no idea, but I'm going to guess around 205, 210.
So you've taken off almost 100 pounds.
Over the years, yeah.
From your plans.
That was a long time ago.
Impressive, sir. Very impressive.
I had to start paying for my own food.
That changes the equation, right?
That changed a lot, yes.
All right, let's talk money. Phil, we are in negative territory this morning in futures trading, and this is being blamed on the CNBC.com website on U.S.-China trade tensions right now as the relationship, it says, is deteriorating. Phil, what do you know about this?
I think they're right. A lot of times we give credit or place blame on market movement, but I think that they are correct in that is, that euphoria that we had over the pause and the seemingly maybe a deal between U.S. and China. We said they weren't following it, and they pushed back and said we weren't following it. So some of that euphoria has dissipated, and some of it is based off of, we just came off a really, really good month. I didn't know this until I was prepping for this last night, but May was the best month we've had since November of 23, and that's really saying something because 24 was a pretty good year. The fourth quarter of 23 was really, really good. So there's that is, that's a super month. So giving a little bit back is kind of natural, but there is some tariff jitters, which is going to persist until everything kind of simmers down, settles down, and we know exactly what the tariffs are going to be. And it's almost like a chain reaction because it goes from tariffs, how much will things cost, what's it mean for the economy, and then the spillover, of course, to the Federal Reserve. And if it causes confusion to them, my perception with what the Federal Reserve is going to do, if there's confusion, then they're just going to stay put. And that wouldn't be, our markets want to see rates decrease slowly, and they're unable to do that if we don't know what the future prices will be. So anytime there's tariff confusion, that spills over to the Federal Reserve, which, of course, we see in our markets and overnight trading. Although it's not severe, it has been a pullback. And Friday, there's a pullback on Friday as well.
Oil, good, Bill.
Phil, you made the comment that once we understand what the tariff's going to be, but we have not known that since they were first introduced, and I get the impression we will not know them because they change on a regular basis. It's been at least 60 different versions of the tariffs in the last 2 or 3 months. So what is your expectation that we're going to settle in and be able to understand and fully appreciate tariffs, what they are, and the impact?
I expect that at some point they'll settle in and be something, especially on our major trading partners, China and the EU, that there will be some consistency there, which will enable us to move forward with how much things will cost and what the Federal Reserve can do and what it means for the economy. But there is a lot of fear that, man, are we going to go through a long period of not knowing, and the ups and downs of, one day we're euphoric because things won't cost as much or the tariffs are going. And it's not so much, I maintain that it's not the existence of tariffs that's caused a lot of volatility. It's the not knowing what the tariffs are going to be. And one of the reasons I point to is if you're a nerd like myself and you watch the markets when major speeches occur, Tyler Butler and I in our office was watching on Liberation Day, and the first part of the speech was the announcement that there's going to be 10% tariffs across the board. And immediately our stock market jumped, and it jumped quite a bit in overnight trading. And then out came the chart, which inserted something different for a lot of different trading partners. And we reversed course, and then the next 3 days had three of the worst days our markets have ever experienced. And so I maintain, and a lot of people maintain, that it's not necessarily that tariffs exist as long as they're reasonable, but it's the uncertainty of what they're going to be. And the transparency, of course, that we see in the negotiation does cause some, market swings to the good and bad. And so there's good in there as well, but, whether or not we can hold on to that. And there's all these trades that start to surface. We get new acronyms all the time. The taco trade was something I heard about for the first time on Thursday and Friday, and I hope that doesn't become really popular because I don't know if you guys had heard of the taco trade, but Trump always chickens out. I don't want to threaten this man, and I don't want his resilience tested because that could lead to higher tariffs, quite honestly. So there's a whole lot of fears and a whole lot of acronyms and a whole lot of different types of trading that's coming out. But just like you said, there is a fear that this will never be settled. And it will always be a back and forth. And even if there's an agreement put in place, will we back out or will they back out or will there be accusations that they're not doing what they're supposed to do and we're not doing what we're supposed to do and the like. So therefore those agreements may be ripped up and started all over. So just a lot of confusion on what those could be, hopefully. And I'm hopeful that eventually they'll settle in and we'll know what the tariffs are, and that would allow us to move forward.
I don't think we ever will. I don't think this is a financial move. This is a political move. And the idea, Trump is a disruptor, and the idea is to get people on their back foot and be concerned and be willing to come to the negotiating table to negotiate whatever it is he's got in mind for the individual countries, the individual industries.
On that particular day.
On that particular day. Yeah. But you look at if you look at the markets in the way, and my feelings about markets versus the economy, you look at the way the markets reacted initially, and it looked like doomsday. I actually asked, when is it time to pull money out of the market? And now, and by the way, I never expected to do that, but now the markets have recovered. Where are we at? The Dow is at 42.2, and these are all political moves. And I think it's a mistake to try to figure out the financial element of this. But as people get accustomed to the constant change, then the change becomes the norm, and it's just background noise as far as the markets are concerned.
Yeah, and if you look at, there's a lot of arguments to both sides of the tariff war and what it does to our markets. But if you look at, one argument is, look at April 1st, the day before Liberation Day, our overall S&P 500, which we think is the most important indice when you're looking at the health of the U.S. stock market, it's up over 4%. And since that day, so since Liberation Day, and of course we had that tremendous fall and then the great Wednesday that preceded it afterwards, and then, of course, a really good May. So the unwinding of some of those tariffs or the pause of a lot of those tariffs, the end result from day one to today, even with Friday in this morning's markets, we're up about 4% since then. So do you give that, and I don't know that I do, but do you give credit to the on and off tariffs to the bump that we've gotten in our markets over the last 2 months, April and May? And I don't know that I necessarily agree with that. But overall, some would point to it and say, look, our economy is still in a snapshot. Our economy is still in pretty good health. Although the tariffs may not be priced into inflation readings yet, our inflation readings continue to go in the right direction. We got that last week with the PCE numbers, part of the alphabet soup of reports on inflation, and a snapshot of our employment markets. They look okay. So now there's debates on whether or not tariffs have been baked into that. Some say, yeah, but we knew the tariffs were coming, so companies started to bake it in long before Liberation Day. And some says, no, we didn't start doing this until Liberation Day. I imagine that some of the tariffs have made their way into our inflation readings and into the employment market. Maybe just not fully yet, but how can you fully bake in what the tariffs are going to be if you don't know what they're going to be? So I think, and on some extent, no different than a personal budget. If you didn't know how much something was going to cost your family and you knew you had expenses coming up or expenses would rise, you may hold back on some of your spending. And companies do the same thing to some extent, especially those with international exposure, getting some supplies from international companies. Ford CEO had a really good interview that kind of shed light on how they look at it. But with the semiconductors that they use in their cars. But if, on a personal level, you would do the same thing. I would hope. If you didn't know how much things were going to cost, you'd probably hold on to your purse a little bit tighter or to your wallet a little bit tighter. And companies, I think, would do that as well, and maybe even increase some prices on what they've got on the shelves, even though they may not have paid that for it. They're going to go ahead and bake that in because the cost of the inventory on the way in, they expect to be higher.
Bill, oil prices are up nearly 5% this morning, natural gas up over 6%, okay. And this is because OPEC Plus said that they will keep their output increases unchanged. In other words, they're still going to pump more oil onto the market, just not as much as people fear. They're going to keep it the same as they did it last month. And the report I read said that the market's already priced that increase in, so they're kind of overjoyed this morning, and that's why oil prices are going up.
Yep, just a supply and demand equation, and OPEC has a great deal of control over that with how much they are willing to release it or not release. So their release of that was a little bit of a surprise, and you see that in overnight trading. So if you have oil in your portfolio, you're probably happy, but when you go to the gas pump, as Rob talks about quite often, you're probably not going to be from that standpoint. So a consumer and an investor in the same vehicle is going to have two different feelings about it.
I'm just seeing prices go into the 280s on my drive home now, which is a lovely price, by the way. I hate to see it jump back up.
Hey, Phil.
Probably shortly will. Yes, sir.
We heard that when Trump first backed off, it was because of not the equities, not because of anything else. It's because of the bonds. Bonds, I'm sure, are influenced by tariffs. But are they influenced as much by tariffs as equities? Admittedly, I don't know very much about bonds.
It does lead to the Federal Reserve, and they kind of are, because the Federal Reserve is put on pause on the perception that goods and services will cost more in the future, and cutting rates, which would help the bond market, is another inflationary pressure. So that's why they want that 2% target. That's why that's so low. And so their thought is, if tariffs are going to increase inflation, then we can't feed into that by cutting rates along with it and spurring on more inflation than what the tariffs will even do. So the pause by the Federal Reserve is the one big reason why our bond market yields have continued to rise over the last couple of months.
Trump was in Pittsburgh over the weekend announcing the steel tariffs doubling from 25 to 50%. Surprisingly, U.S. steel stock is not up by that much this morning, though. Phil, you would think it would jump more, wouldn't you?
Some of the companies, if you look at the overall industry, it's not up that much, but some of the companies, the deal that he approved, and the two names of the companies that he approved the merger with, escape me for the second, but those companies have, as I understand, have done well in overnight trading. But so that perception or that move has really helped those two companies in particular, maybe not the overall U.S. steel market, but those two companies in particular. As I understand, I haven't seen it, but as I understand from CNBC anyway, that those two companies have done really well in overnight trading.
Cleveland Cliff's one of them, I believe.
Yeah, I saw Cleveland
I think
Cliffs
you're right.
on the MSNBC.com website, right?
Yeah.
That's what you're referring
Exactly
to, Bill?
right. Exactly, yes.
Yeah. Phil, the last inflation report had us, I think, at 2.1% for the last measuring period, whether that was monthly or quarterly, I don't recall. Does that mean perhaps sooner rather than later Powell will lower interest rates?
It could, and it's something that they look at strongly because it was the PCE, the third of the inflation reports that come out, and although our markets react more to the CPI or the PPI because they're the first two that come out, they maintain that they look at the PCE more than anything else. So again, part of that the last of the alphabet soup, but it does help the case for rate cuts in the future at some point this year, because we're getting down to that target that they hope that we get down to. But then again, if there's uncertainty on the tariff front, does it even change that target? Whereas before, that could have been a trigger to introduce more rate cuts. But looking forward, does tariffs cause things to cost more? And there's debates on whether or not tariffs will cause things to cost more money. And if that's the case, and there's a yin and yang there, there's a pushback with future tariffs. But it could also enable Trump to be more stringent on tariffs, thinking that inflation is getting down to where we wanted anyway, so this isn't going to cause that much damage.
How do we reach you for more information today, Phil?
You can reach us at 304-263-4343 or stop by and see us with an appointment at 1270 Winchester Avenue right here in Martinsburg.
Thank you, Phil. Have a great day.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Phil. And you can catch Phil for 2 minutes each weekday morning, 6:38, replayed at 7:38, right here on this station. Now let's welcome in Mayor Kevin Knowles from the city of Martinsburg. Kevin, thank you for dropping by this morning.
Thanks for having me.
Appreciate it. What do you know about the passing of Mayor Karros?
Well, yesterday I received a phone call that George had passed away, and it's a sad news. George was in, from what I know, was in hospice for the last few weeks, and he had passed away yesterday morning. And I know that the city of Martinsburg and myself, I go back with George back about 22 years when I first met him, and it's just a sad day for the city of Martinsburg. He did a lot of great things with the city here.
Tell me about your first meeting with Mayor Karros, and tell me about winning the seat of mayor and your conversations with George during that time.
Well, George and I met back in 2004, I believe. I moved here in 2003, and the first person that introduced me to him was Rick Wachtel.
Sure.
Got to know Rick, and even I think Bill was one of the first people that I met when I first moved here, and you got to know the different people in the community. And the first time that I met George, I knew I was meeting a fine gentleman. Anytime that everywhere you would see George was always in a suit and a tie, and he treated you with the utmost respect, whether he agreed with some of the things that you believed in or not. He was the kind of guy that you can have those discussions with and then still go out to lunch and have dinner and maybe play golf with him. But George was just a stand-up guy.
You obviously took the position of mayor under difficult circumstances as well, with the passing of Mayor Harriet Johnston, too. So obviously that was not the way you prefer to become mayor, but did you have any conversations with George once you did become mayor?
I did not. George, for the last couple of years, was pretty much out of the public eye. He used to go to Rotary just about every week, and he stopped going to Rotary, and he and his wife were enjoying his time off and doing things not only here locally but also, I believe, in Florida, where he had another place to live.
Bill?
Yeah, I think George is the type of fellow that realized that his successor did not need his input. I think a good manager realized it's his time to move on, and the most destructive thing he can do was to try to keep involved from a distance. George was not that type of guy. George let Harriet Johnson take over. George developed a life without being mayor, and I think it was to everyone's advantage. George was a point guard, and was a pretty good point guard in basketball, to understand. Short, probably 5'4", 5'5", and so not a big man. but it's not a big man in stature, but a absolutely huge man in every other regard. You've alluded to it. I spoke to it earlier, and Larry Kump spoke to it. What impressed me about, well, several things impressed me about George is there had been friction, I think, between the city and the county years ago, and after George's time there's some friction, but George worked very hard not to reduce, to eliminate the friction between the city and the county. He was willing to go that extra mile to find areas that we could cooperate with. George, and I used this word before, and it's very important to me, George was a man of integrity. If George told you something, I never one time found that he went back upon his word. You did not need that proverbial contract. You didn't even need a handshake. George told you something, and you could depend upon it. There's always a twinkle in his eye. I found that if things were not going well for me when I was county commissioner, I would find a reason to go down to Patterson drugstore. George and I would sit down at the back booth in Patterson's, and we would have a cup of coffee, and we would just talk things through. Meant a lot to me. Nothing was ever really agreed to. We didn't have to. We were just talking things through. He was a friend you could depend upon. He was a shoulder you could cry upon if you needed to. He was a gentleman in every regard. It's awful hard to think of anything negative when you think about George Karras. It's very, very, very easy to think of good, positive things about George Karras.
Yeah, he served the city of Martinsburg for over 40 years as a councilman and a mayor, and I believe he was 20 years as mayor. And it just goes to show all the things that we've seen here over the last 20 years. George had his hand in, and we're going to continue to move forward to help with his legacy also.
Raleigh Street Extension was a major project for George to finally get accomplished.
And the building of the police station was under his tutelage, and actually named a room after him in the police station, the community room. It's the George Karras room.
But now the police station, if memory serves, that was primarily with city money that you'd saved. Raleigh Street Extension, though, required federal money.
About 30 years of work, too.
Yeah. And I can remember at one meeting where Senator Manchin was there, and George was in the audience. And as Joe Manchin was giving his remarks, getting ready to take questions, he looked at George and said, "George, I know exactly what you're going to talk to me about, and that's going to be Raleigh Street Extension. We'll skip to somebody else." And George was persistent in getting that need made.
Kevin, thanks for dropping by. We got to get to our top of the hour break. This is Talk Radio WRNR Martinsburg.
Thank you.